Every day, the world moves on as it always has. Cities wake up, work begins, and life feels familiar. But beneath that sense of normality, something is shifting. The climate is changing, and the systems we rely on, energy, food, water, cities, finance, are under pressure in ways we're only beginning to understand. These changes don't live in reports or projections, they are already shaping people, livelihoods, and communities. We created the Climate Leadership Podcast so these challenges don't remain abstract or distant, but are explored through the people working inside these systems, making real decisions with real consequences, often without clear answers. This is not a space for fear, blame, or perfection. It's a space for honest conversations about what leadership looks like in a changing world. If you're listening, you're already part of that leadership. Let's begin the conversation.
Welcome to another episode of the Climate Leadership Podcast. Today's conversation focuses on one of the most critical yet often overlooked fronts in the climate transition: housing. The built environment accounts for a significant share of emissions, and the homes people live in every day shape not only carbon footprints but also health, affordability, and social mobility. As the UK works towards its net zero ambitions, housing associations and community based organizations are playing a vital role. Decarbonizing homes is not just about insulation, heat pumps, and retrofit programs. It is about ensuring people live in warm, safe, affordable homes while creating thriving and resilient communities. Joining us today is Mr. Ben Earl, Sustainability Leader and Head of Partnerships and Sustainability at the Abri Group. At Abri Group, Ben works at the intersection of sustainability, partnerships, and community development. With experience spanning utilities, NGO leadership, corporate responsibility, and sustainable business strategy, Ben brings a powerful perspective on how climate action must intersect with social justice, partnerships, and long-term systems thinking. In this episode, we explore why housing is central to climate strategy, how partnerships enable real-world delivery, and what it truly takes to align net zero ambition with community empowerment. Thank you, Ben, for joining me today, and it's great to have you today in my show. So before we begin, can you please give a bit introduction about yourself?
Yes, hello, and delighted to be here. Yes, so I'm Ben. As I say, I've got a sort of career in sustainability from different perspectives, and I think it's those different perspectives that have enabled me to look at partnership working in different ways to deliver on what are common shared goals, and none of us can actually solve this problem, this really complex problem of climate change by ourselves. It's about working together, and so actually bringing different parts of society together to help us is what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to begin, when we talk about sustainability in housing today, what does that really mean in practical terms, and how has the role of sustainability evolved with larger housing providers over the past decades?
Well, I like to start on this kind of topic by looking at, most of us have hopefully a warm, dry house or roof over our heads at night, and I like to get alongside where our customers are as housing associations. A lot of our customers aren't the most wealthy in society, and they often are sort of living in a home that they spend a lot of their disposable income trying to maintain in terms of rent and how they pay their bills. So I like to think of how does this topic relate to us as individuals, and we all have to pay an energy bill, we all have to pay a water bill, we all have some mode of transport in order to get around, and we, at the end of the day, we like to live in a nice, warm, comfortable home that is not too expensive to heat and light and power. And I think that's what this subject means to me. It's about how do we sort of move to a future world where we can get a lot of these services in a much more sustainable way, but that also gives us that positive way of living, that more aspirational way of having warmer homes and healthier lives.
Right. So, Ben, before I move forward, I was just thinking that I keep hearing in news, for example, Canada is going through housing crisis. Is there any housing crisis in the US currently? According to you, what do you think?
Oh, we've got a housing crisis, I would say, in lots of parts of the world. In the UK, it's absolutely acute. You know, getting access to affordable homes is something that a housing association such as Abri is on the front line to try and solve. So we have set quite ambitious targets to build more homes and to make more homes available, because not everyone has the disposable income to immediately fund a mortgage to actually buy a new home. And actually, if you're in some of our cities, particularly, then the cost of doing so is prohibitive to many people. So yes, the housing crisis is one of shortage, but it's also one of quality. And I think we'll explore that in the moments ahead.
Okay, Ben. So housing is responsible for a significant portion of national emissions. From your experience, what are the biggest challenges in decarbonizing existing housing stock at scale?
Well, again, the UK is part of a system which, having access to affordable homes is really, really important. But the UK also has heritage homes, many of which have for decades not had the proper investment to keep up with the sort of modern building standards. So the real challenge is, how do we get the majority of the housing stock upgraded to cope with the demands of modern living, but also the actual needs of actually making sure that you've well insulated, but you're aerating, and also you're providing a heat load that is sustainable. Because this is where the relationship to fossil fuels comes in. Long term, we have to break the link to fossil fuels to get energy bills down and to get homes more affordable for all.
Right. So Ben, I'm just thinking that I came to UK last year. Before that, I've lived in the US, I've lived in Singapore and India. So UK is designed for a colder weather conditions, But when you come to May, June, July, right now, because of climate change, it's getting very warm. And UK housing does not have air conditioners, right? So do you think about that? Is it a problem in the making?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a problem in the making. I mean, the baked-in carbon emissions associated with at least a 1.5 degrees rise in temperatures that we've already almost baked to our trajectories means that hotter summers are coming, and it is a big concern that overheating is going to become a big issue for UK housing stock. Now, traditionally, what will happen and what happens with the DIY sector is during hot weather, customers go out and buy portable air conditioning. Well, again, from a carbon emissions point of view and a cost point of view, that's not great for customer welfare either. So yes, you're absolutely right. We have to now be baking in and designing our homes to adapt to a changing climate. And that's something that UK housing in particular is going to need a real culture shock on. New homes are now being assessed with that in mind, but certainly there is no widespread consideration yet when it comes to building regulations for existing homes. And I think it's something that is going to become acutely more important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Abri has committed both to building new homes and to investing heavily in communities. How do you balance climate ambition with social responsibility to provide warm, safe, and affordable housing?
Well, I think it's a conundrum that is absolutely right there. I mean, if you just ignore the climate bit to start with, just investing in existing stock and investing in new stock at the same time is just difficult from a sort of project pipeline and investability point of view, because one of the things that the UK housing associations pride themselves in is we are long-term investors, and we have good credit rating. So actually, in order to borrow money from investors to actually spend on property and assets, you need to have that stability, that ability to kind of show that we're very responsible with the funding that we get. You then add in this dual need to go back and go through all of your stock with a new lens to look at how climate adaptable it is, if you like. How can you adapt those homes to the new world, but also what is needed in terms of reducing those emissions. And the actual level of ambition and level of funding are then very high. And so yeah, it is a challenge. There are also short-term challenges that we are being regulated for. So, for example, building safety, fire safety has become a massive part of our consideration, particularly since the Grenfell fire in London and the new regulations that have come in around building safety. But then we've also had a tragic case of a young person up in a social house up in the Midlands who unfortunately lost their life because of damp and mold in homes. Now, the relationship between damp and mold and energy efficiency is strong, because if you properly assess a home for its energy efficiency and you fit the measures needed to upgrade from a cold, damp home to a warm, cozy home, then damp and mold should get eliminated in the process. So this is a totally aligned kind of process, but it doesn't take away the need to balance the areas of investment. So new build investment comes with it a set of criteria and a process that is different to how you fund existing stock. And so these things are being grappled with at the same time. But yes, as an organization, we have to balance those needs.
Mm-hmm. So Ben, you were talking about safety, which is a very, very critical issue. And in India, we always give examples that safety standards are very much adhered in the UK and US. So do you think there's a strong safety culture, strong safety standards? Does sustainability culture and sustainability standards, are they also in place or in the making?
Sustainability standards have been improving, but what you tend to find is that they lag behind the scale of the issues, and standards generally catch up, usually through some shock event. And as I say, the Grenfell fire was a good example of how that has changed safety standards on fire safety. But on sustainability, again, we are still kind of lagging behind the scale of the change needed. And I think that's where, so for example, Part L looks at overheating in new homes. So there is now a consideration for it. But in terms of granularity, it's still a very blunt assessment tool that's not properly being looked at in the round. And similarly with where we're going with energy efficiency standards, there's lots of new things to be welcoming, particularly in the last 12 months from this current government, which is starting to join the dots and actually bringing in a kind of holistic regulatory framework that is going to really help this. So new energy performance certificates, for example, are coming. We've got changes to the SAP calculations that make up how you assess the energy usage of a home and the efficiency of a home. You've got the whole minimum energy efficiency standards, which is coming, and you've got the new future home standard coming for new build. All of this is going in the right direction, and over time we're ironing out some of the anomalies between things. But it is, and at the same time we've also got much stricter reporting standards. There's definitely a big focus on not greenwashing, to make sure that when you are making claims about what you're doing on sustainability standards, that you can back it up with evidence. And that's something we take extremely seriously at Abri, that if we are going to come out and say we have achieved something, we have that regulatory framework, or that sort of system behind us to back up and prove what we're doing.
Right. Okay, so partnerships are very central to your role. What are cross-sector partnerships so critical in delivering sustainability outcomes in housing, and what makes a partnership truly effective rather than symbolic?
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. Partnership working is absolutely where it's at. I alluded to this earlier on, just basically reinforcing the need for us to be commonly addressing shared problems. And you know, we have partnerships in all different forms. We have very formal partnerships, like we have some joint ventures with developers on new build projects. We have some informal partnerships where we have, you know, some sort of partnership working that's very informal and ongoing. And then we have some, you know, agreement-led partnerships where we have everything very much bottomed out and agreed in a legal document. One example, we've just been coming to the end of a biodiversity project across one of our existing housing estates in Southampton, where we've been retrofitting with lots of public consultation and events for the general public to join in and our residents to join in on, about how can we integrate more biodiversity features into a housing estate. And this was a formal partnership we signed with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, and the Wildlife Trust has been working with us, advising us on key aspects, but also doing some of the work on the ground, talking to our customers, our residents, if you like, about what they'd like to see and how it should be shaped. And that's been a really important opportunity for us to kind of work together in a meaningful partnership with a sustainability focus, but with a wildlife group that has got credibility in this field. So yeah, partnerships are absolutely critical, and they feature in nearly all the work we do.
Okay. So Ben, there is often a debate about focusing on new net zero homes versus retrofitting the older properties. So in your view, where does the greatest opportunity and urgency lie?
Well, I think this is a numbers game, to be honest. If you look at where we need to be in 2050 to be net zero, and the UK has courageously and quite rightly signed up to be a net zero country by then 80% of the houses that are going to be around in 2050 have already been built. So really, I would say retrofit is where it needs to go. And retrofit basically needs looking at all of our stock and almost having like a house passport for it. So we would like to see, as a sustainability team, assessing every property, looking at all of the features that need to be added to get it to net zero, what the cost of each of those features will be, when they're going to be applied to the property, how that can be integrated into existing programs of work. So if we're in a place doing a roof, for example, can we put solar on the roof at the same time because you've got scaffolding up? These sort of things, looking at each of the reductions of carbon associated with each of those measures, and coming up almost with a passport, so that the resident living in that property knows it's going to happen when, and we can, from an audit trail, show that right across our stock. And similarly with new builds, obviously a lot of our homes will be replaced, and we'll be building new homes as well. So we've got regeneration as well as new build. And again, it's important that we're tracking those and how they fit into the overall picture going forward.
Okay, so financing this transition remains a major hurdle. How should housing associations think about funding decarbonisation programs while maintaining affordability for its residents?
Well, I think it's about exploring all options here, because traditional sources of finance have been how housing associations have funded it, whether it be banks or other funds that have traditionally loaned on quite good rates because of the long-term nature of our stock, and how, as I say, our credit rating has been strong. But one of the things that's really forced its way into the market is the fact that high energy costs are now driving real changes to the way that funding can be used to get faster improvements for customers. So if you look at the implementation of solar, and then increasingly going to be battery storage going forward, because homes use energy and that those homes need to pay an energy bill, you're paying for energy anyway. So if you can displace that energy by more homegrown energy, but you can do that in a way that almost overspecs the solar, so that your house not just generates the energy that it was using, but actually generates more energy than it was using. That energy is then sellable back to the grid and comes with a financial advantage, if you like. So you can then offset some of the costs of installing the kit by selling back getting some of the profit off the sales of that energy. So you've got to think laterally with some of the ways we're looking at this. I mean, PPAs, power purchase agreements, or and things like that have been around for a while. Linking up housing schemes with opportunities to use that energy by a big user nearby. That's all opportunistic as well. And there's other ESG type of funding that is coming out, because a lot of pension funds now are starting to shift where they put their investments based on how good those organizations are reporting on and addressing their sustainability challenges, because nobody wants to be investing in things that are ultimately going to cause more of the problems longer term down the line. And so there is a lot of ability to borrow from different sources. And I think this is one thing that the housing associations need to be more flexible on going forward.
Okay. When I was thinking about one thing, like we get electricity in our houses, can you share with me how is this electricity where is this electricity being generated in the UK? Is it the gas which generates this electricity, or how?
Well, I mean, we're on a real transition when it comes to electricity in the UK. So by 2030, the government wants to have at least 80% of all its power coming from renewable sources. And that's good news for customers long term. Now, transitions are always bumpy, and there's always extra costs involved with having to upgrade systems and things. But long term, we need to be getting off the gas grid, because at the moment, most of our gas now is imported and we are buying on international markets. Well, we've seen wars, the Ukraine war, and now the recent Gulf war is actually adding to these costs. So if we generate more of our own wind and solar energy, and we can able to store more of it and have the background base load of nuclear, that is a more sustainable and a cheaper system long term. And the good news is, on a day like today in the UK, which is windy and sunny, then we're about probably 73% of our power at the moment is coming from renewable sources. So the transition is already underway and it is happening. The grid is revolutionizing. So a few years ago, coal would have been a key part of the UK energy mix. It is completely not there at the moment, and it won't be in the future. Gas is going a similar way, although there'll always be some gas for backup systems. And obviously, if you combine gas with carbon capture technology, then you can actually take some of the carbon impact of that gas away. But yeah, it's a transition. It's good news for customers, but we've got to make sure that we fully electrify the grid and make sure that it's got the capacity we need and the backup needed to give us the stability we need when we turn on our lights or our ovens at night.
Right. Okay. So beyond carbon reduction, housing impacts health, employment, and well-being. How do you measure success when sustainability is tied so closely to social outcomes?
Yeah, it is a crucial question, because, how do we prove that by taking diesel vehicles off the road, that we are improving people's lives, or that by putting in a heat pump system and not having a gas hob in the home, for example, we're improving those customer health outcomes. It is actually quite challenging. We take quite a holistic view here. So social value is very much embedded into what we do. So a lot of the contractors we work with on our supply chain are actively working with us to fund projects and to seek those outcomes that we're after. And we're very keen on driving that forward. But it's about getting this balance right, and particularly with job creation, making sure that we're at the forefront of helping our customers get active roles that is going to enhance their life and their livelihoods. I talked about energy savings before. Imagine if we can take a customer off a typical average energy bill of about £1,700 a year and take that down to under 1,000. That immediately gives them money back in their pockets to spend on other priorities in their lives, and that's something that we've got to show, is a real positive for those customers. So yeah, these things are really, really important. They're high on our list. Social value is at the forefront of everything that we're looking at as an organization.
Okay. So from a leadership perspective, what mindset is required to embed sustainability into organizational strategy rather than treating it as a compliance function?
Well, I think this is a really crucial one for all organizations, because traditionally sustainability has been kind of bottom up. You traditionally hire sustainability specialists who take away the problem for the business. But these days it's now being seen from top down. The most effective organizations are the ones that have got it in their corporate strategy with very clear accountability, maybe financial remuneration targets for senior leaders, and that then have real accountability around objectives, so that the business can see this is what was being strived for, this is what was achieved, and this is the outcome that then feeds into reporting standards. That needs to be a much more holistic, joined up approach. If you then link in the financial institutions to see the outcomes, then you can pair some of your balance sheet loans to specific improved targets, and that gives everyone confidence that you mean what you say. So I think it is a real leadership thing. We expect our senior leaders, our exec boards, to actually take this seriously and to show the visibility that they're discussing it on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Right. So finally, Ben, looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what would success look like if housings were fully recognized as a central pillar of climate action in the UK?
Well, I'll bring it back to how I started, just thinking about our homes and our lives. At the end of the day, we want to live in a warmer, cozier, cheaper to run, but beautiful house that does everything we want to do. So housing, and I think the sustainable future gives us that opportunity. So we'll have cleaner air, we'll have warmer homes, we'll have cheaper bills, we'll have lower emissions, and that comes together with maybe more biodiversity in our local neighborhoods, easier access to cheaper public transport. It's all going to be helping in setting a vision of what success looks like. So it's not just about hitting a certain number of targets to tick boxes. It's about, can you say you're living a healthier life with that's actually more desirable than we are now? And I think when it comes to the UK's aging or older housing stock, a lot of people are struggling with high bills and low satisfaction, and we need to change that round to high satisfaction and lower bills.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ben. So before I conclude this conversation, I was just thinking that 10 years from, like, in the past, 10, 20 years in the past, we did not hear these questions. These questions were not at the forefront. But today, these questions are so important for us. What changed? What changed according to you that these questions are now at the forefront of conversations?
I agree. I think we have really shifted. Even 10 years ago, if you'd said about mobile phones and how much they were doing for us in our lives, you probably wouldn't have seen quite the full extent of it. And I think give it another 5 or 10 years' time, the world will have changed significantly, and we will be living under a series of challenges that is going to change how we view these things. And the challenge we have as sustainability professionals is trying to get the meetings of today, the focus groups of today, the customers of today to understand that the things we're trying to address here are going to be absolutely essential to their lives. But in many cases, they don't quite know it yet. And I think it's this frustration we have as trying to be on this visionary path where we're having to make changes, but you can't always see the immediate relevance at this point, but you will do as it emerges how important going forward it is. So it's a very interesting time to be. I mean, I'll probably quote the former President Obama, who said that basically that we are the sort of last generation to understand the risks of climate change, but can actually do something about it. And I think that drives me on to be as good as I can to take people not just on the journey of the theory, but also the practical journey of how we're going to make those changes, because you can't just keep ignoring something when it's going to be such a big drain on our everyday lives going forward.
Okay, so thank you, Ben, for such a thoughtful and insightful conversation. Today's discussion highlights that housing sits at the intersection of climate, social equity, health, and economic resilience. Decarbonizing homes is not simply a technical challenge. It is a human challenge that requires long-term thinking, strong partnerships, and courageous leadership. As the UK accelerates towards net zero, housing associations, policymakers, businesses, and communities must work together to ensure that climate solutions improve lives rather than create new inequalities. For leaders across sectors, the message is clear. Sustainability in housing is not a peripheral agenda. It is central to building resilient communities, reducing emissions at scale, and delivering a fair transition. Thank you for joining us on the Climate Leadership Podcast. We will be back soon with more conversations shaping the future of climate leadership. Until next time, take care and have a nice day. Bye-bye.